Hi, I'm Rick Belden, and this is Masculinity from the Inside Out, an exploration of the inner lives of men. If you find this content valuable, please like, share, and ring the bell for notifications. Thank you.
In an ideal scenario, would the primary figure that a young boy projects his ideal like hero, who he wants to be, would that be onto his father early on? Um, and how common or is there anything wrong at all with it being even a fictional character? Is that normal? Whatever normal means.
Interesting, interesting questions because this ties back to the discussion we had about modeling and mentorship with boys. So I think it's perfectly natural and uh, absolutely to be expected that a young boy's first hero is going to be his father, because there's sort of a natural tendency to do that. Again, we're talking about uh, the need for models and modeling of behavior of what it means to be a man, what the masculine is, how it's expressed, and so forth. And so that certainly was my tendency. I mean, my father was absolutely my hero. I idealized him because I needed that. And but as we talked about with mentoring in the previous discussion, uh, no matter how good my father might have been, uh, and in some ways he was, and in a lot of ways he wasn't, but even if he had been ideal, going back to that previous discussion, there are still individual differences between us that where he can't really satisfy the modeling. He can't really satisfy that full connection with everything that's inside me and every aspect of who I am that's trying to emerge and trying to express and trying to look around and go, what's the best way to do this? So I think even under the best of circumstances, boys are going to be attracted to fictional heroes as models. And of course, that goes, you know, that's ancient. And it goes all the way back to the storytelling days. It goes all the way back to every culture has its mythology and has its mythological heroes. And so there's something about the ideal that's represented by a fictional hero that, among other things, can't be fully represented by any human being.
Right. I think so. I was kind of with my question in the beginning about in an ideal scenario, is it the father? Underneath that, I have an intuitive feeling that even no matter even if your relationship with your dad is amazing, there's a part of you that yearns for more, for
Mhm.
beyond, more than what your dad is and could ever be, and so that you're going to have to project that upon to somewhere.
Because,
One
and
thing.
part of that, Chris, is because what's our attraction to heroes? It's aspirational. It's about aspiring to something that's greater than typically what a human being can actually be. Uh, we want to aim for the thing that's higher, and even the best father can't necessarily hit that sort of mark consistently all the time. And
Right.
part of it's just because we're imperfect as humans. And part of it goes back to what I said a moment ago, which is that, you know, myself and my father in the most ideal sort of situation, we're still not the same people.
Hmm.
There are things inside me that have a need to express and actualize and so forth that he doesn't have. So, in order for me to see that outside of myself somewhere, I've got to look somewhere else.
Hmm. Hmm. And I think like we have to. So this is my thought on mythology and having heroes as a young child or even into adulthood. It calls us to like we set our projection upon a figure that's greater than we can be in order so that it can pull us forward,
Mhm.
pull a part of ourselves that's not yet actualized, and I mean, I know for me personally, yeah, I know you mentioned yours is Iron Man. Mine was an anime character from the Dragon Ball Z series called Goku. And
Okay.
uh he was I had an obsession not only over like the way that he battled and how brave he was, but with his character, with who he was, how he carried himself throughout the series. I actually think anime does an awesome job. That the anime does an awesome job of kind of like creating a lot of figures like that in
Hmm.
anime type of work. Virtuous, courageous characters aiming for the good of all that you can really like fall in love with. I mean, you got Goku, you got Avatar, you got Ash, the Pokemon trainer. Like these are all anime figures that I think a lot of millennials especially can really relate to.
Hmm. And so isn't it interesting to see how this emerges in its own way uh, across generations?
Yeah.
So for me, my generation, at least, for me anyway, it was like, oh, Superman, Batman, and then the Marvel characters. Because like when I was 10 years old, 9 or 10 years old, or 8 or 9 or 10 years old, Marvel was not popular. That was like that was like the counterculture comics, and so it was just coming into popularity. So if you if you were a DC person and you went off into Marvel land, you were kind of going off into uncharted territory that seemed a little bit weird, because it had the characteristics of the characters were different. They were more flawed in a lot of ways. They had very
Yeah,
distinct
yeah,
flaws.
yeah, yeah.
So that's part of, I think, where the how do you what connects you with a hero. Well, I think there's a color. I talked about the aspirational part. There's a couple other parts I think are important. One is identification. So you see something in that fictional representation
Mhm.
that feels like you,
Or what you could be.
or what you could be, right? So it's that identification with an
Uh,
ideal that
yeah,
you have
absolutely,
somewhere inside you.
absolutely.
And then another part, which is kind of related to that, it's not quite the same in my mind, is validation. So for me, with the Iron Man character, I wasn't conscious of this as a kid, but there were a lot of aspects of that character that felt like they validated my experience. And
Mm,
so that was another pathway to connection for me.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, I feel that like, so I did that in two ways. One with Goku, it was all about how he wasn't going to battle to kill. He was going to battle to do what was right. He was never trying to express violence just for the sake of violence. Another way in which that showed up for me was with Kobe Bryant. He, his character, who he was. Well, Kobe taught me so much, man. Gosh, but one thing that comes to mind now is that like that there's a way that you can channel your competitive nature and your obsessiveness in a way for great.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing I want to mention because I think it's relevant, Kobe taught me was that you can actually create within yourself a hero or a mythological figure to follow, which is like an alter ego. Um, David Goggins actually talks about this a lot. You know how he has David Goggins and then he has Goggins. It's kind of the same thing. Kobe had the Black Mamba. I think a lot of artists and performers have an alter ego that they enter. You can actually you can create that as almost like a different part of yourself whenever you need to call on these greater traits that maybe you feel like aren't safe or what's the word, appropriate to kind of
Mm-hmm.
embody at all times.
Right.
Yeah,
Right. So there's sort of a transcendent nature to
yeah.
that, which is that you're tapping into forces, and you're tapping into attributes that transcend who you are as an individual. They exist outside of us as individuals. They're out there, and we see them embodied in people that are outside of us, whether they're fictional characters or whether they're an athlete, like you said, or some artists that we admire.
Mhm.
um, and so that gives us they provide a template for us to see what that might look like.
Right. And I think the really great, I don't really know what made this come to mind, maybe because I was watching a little bit of him earlier today, but like I think some of the really transcendent great leaders of our time, they will even I was thinking of Ram Dass anyways. He talks
Mhm.
about even how to handle being projected upon, which I think, like how to even handle uh whenever others choose to set you as the focus of their ideal, and
Right.
it comes with an understanding that their idea about you is more than you actually are, and kind of how to navigate that,
Right.
and then not to take that on. I think that's really interesting.
And that's an important point again that ties back to our discussion about sort of that transition from being someone who is seeking a mentor, someone who is benefiting from a relationship to a mentor, to actually reaching a point in your life, whenever it is, where you also become a mentor for others. And so in the process of doing that, I think you have to demythologize the people that you idealized, so that you can actually bring them down to earth. And so you
Mhm.
can understand that, yes, I can be that for somebody else too. They're
Yeah,
not gods, they're not
absolutely.
mythological figures.
Right.
Although that's what you do initially, so that you can actually put them into a context where you can relate to them in an aspirational way. And
So that you
sometimes if you get to know those people, you'll be really disappointed.
Yeah, right. So that you can have something to aim for, you have to create them as, you don't try to do this, but you just do. You create them as more than they could be, because you have to find something that's more than you are to push after.
Well, and as you said, you're projecting your desired but unmet aspirations onto them.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so that's
yeah.
what I said before, is like they provide a template
Mhm,
that is like their public persona or their fictional persona. And
mhm,
then you project, you say, oh, that's you do a pattern match unconsciously. And you go, oh, that matches the pattern that I'm looking for.
right.
And then you project all those things that you find desirable, or you see those things in that person that you find desirable, and you are drawn to it, and then you grab it, you internalize it, and you make your own little model of
Mhm.
who that person is.
And I think it's really, as you begin to understand that dynamic, it's really important to hold it in the awareness for yourself, because as you begin to kind of start manifesting in the visions of your own life, and you align with like ways of being that are bringing you like internal, external success, you can avoid, to the best that you can, falling into the traps of taking admiration like too seriously,
Mhm.
and needing it, and over believing in it. And I think that there's a lot to be said for that too, which a great thing to learn from either mentors or people that you admire is how they handle their own success too.
Right. And so one of the things that one of the traps in that, and it doesn't have to be because you have a public persona. It can be even in your own personal relationships.
Mhm.
If you get elevated into that hero role, the kind of shadow side, the other side, the downside is the scapegoat. So if people build expectations around you that you can't meet, um, if you play too hard into that hero role, I think you can set yourself up when they're disappointed to be scapegoated.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's the other side of it. And it
Wow.
happens to people
Never thought about that. Never thought about that.
because sometimes that disappointment is so profound. And it's happened to me in the past. I've had mentors, I've had other men that I've idealized at an earlier point in my life. And when I found out that the model I built internally was like out of sync in some significant way with who
Mhm,
that person actually was, it's like just crushing disappointment.
mhm.
And some of that goes back to, I think, to my father wound. So if I had a foundational relationship with my father that was solid, those kind of disappointments in people that I put in that position might not have hit me that hard. But the problem is that I don't have that foundation. So I projected a lot of my fathering needs and my aspirations that I had for my own relationship with my own father onto those men. And they're not my fathers. And when
Mm-hmm.
it becomes apparent, it throws me back into that deficit that was there that I was trying to compensate for with that. So that's, again, if we keep reflecting back to our mentor discussion. So I guess that there's a caveat there in terms of, as a man, particularly as a young man, when you look at somebody and you see them, it's like, oh, I want that to be my mentor, or that's my hero. Um, just be aware, if you have a father wound, if you had a deficient sort of not solid relationship with your father, that you're probably projecting some of that father stuff that was unmet as a child onto that person, and that's going to fail at some point. And it's
Yeah.
useful to be aware
Well,
of what you're
also,
doing as much as you can.
I also want to add that it could be like, though it could be part of your wounding from father or mother, as you've
Mm-hmm.
discussed before, how it could come across, but also it could just be part of the innate potential that you have in yourself, you know,
Mm-hmm.
that you're just, it's coming forth so that you can understand it, and so it's coming forth in a way where you're seeing it embodied in a person that you have in a mentorship or hero role.
Right.
um, so whenever you just mentioned how it showed how that showed up, the scapegoating kind of showed up or is a potential trap. For me, what came up was that actually I felt that in relationship, which is really interesting because I was expecting to think about a time in my athletic or professional career, like whenever I would have felt that. But really, I felt that whenever I fell into a trap of trying to meet a person's needs that were beyond my boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
And I became like, I started to show up in a relationship like really, really inauthentically, trying to earn that love, which ties to some of my childhood. But as I as I was trying to earn that love, I began to get this positive feedback for being like, oh yeah, I am meeting these emotional needs for this person. I am taking this emotional responsibility. And then whenever I couldn't, I wouldn't say I received blame. I accepted blame. I was in that paradigm. Like it wasn't her fault. I aligned with like accepting that completely. And
Mm-hmm.
like actually that's what really came to mind when you said that, which isn't what I was really that was a surprise.
I think that's an important point on this whole hero discussion. Is that a lot of, and I've done it too. Maybe it's wired in at some level. There's a cultural aspect to it. There's all kinds of, like, trying to meet childhood needs that you talked about. But that whole idea as a man that, like, I'm gonna be her hero. I'm gonna be the hero that she's been waiting for. And so one of the ways that I've express that is by overfunctioning. The thing we talked about in another uh, episode in this series, that whole overfunctioning thing, and starting out trying to perform at such a high level that she sees me in that way, like, oh, this guy's he's the hero I've been waiting for. But I can't sustain that. No, typically we can't sustain that, be in that all the time, and that is a form of I think that is a form of being inauthentic. I think giving more than you really have to give,
Mhm.
because you're trying to get a result, is a form of being inauthentic in that way. And it does,
Absolutely.
it can
Absolutely.
set you up.
Yeah. I mean, it's a trap for self betrayal. It's a trap for narcissism. It's a trap
Mhm.
for codependency.
Yeah.
You can fall into any and all of those traps. So because we keep referring back to some of the prior episodes in relation to this mythology thing, it really seems like a theme that I'm beginning to understand is that whenever you project an ideal version, whether it's in a true real life human or if it's on a fictional character, it needs to be met with the awareness that these are idealized traits that I want to embody within myself. I'm seeing them in another human, not so that I can grasp for the approval or to copy this other person's being, but so that I can bring those, so that I can embody those traits within me, within myself. Like something about me wants to uh realize those traits, whether it be like bravery, courage, integrity, um or even something like fame. And that could start you on a deep process of saying like, okay, well, if I'm idolizing these famous people, well, like, why do I want fame so bad? What will that bring me? And then you can kind of work backwards onto really understanding your true intentions, your true core beliefs. And from there you can like judge like, well, are these worthy of being like core beliefs that I want to continue aligning to? You know what I'm saying? Or do I need to make some changes?
Right. And so that whole thing of uh, feeling drawn to qualities that you see in somebody else. I had a teacher tell me, I don't know, 25 or 30 years ago, I was talking about somebody. It's like, oh, I really admire this person, what they're doing, and all that stuff. And she told me, just, try to remind yourself when you catch yourself saying that, that what you're talking about is qualities that you would like to develop in yourself.
Mhm.
Uh, we tend to externalize those things on other people. And a lot of the time, people will say, well, I really admire so and so for such and such. And you might say, well, is that something you'd like to do? And the answer that comes back is, oh, I could never do that. It's like I would never be brave enough to do that, or I don't know how to do that. And it's I think that's a way of sort of trying to protect yourself from the feeling that if you
For sure.
tried that, you might fail.
Yeah, for sure it is. And I think, whenever we talk about like judging another, you point your finger at somebody, there's three fingers pointed back at you. You can't judge a quality unless you understand and have seen that quality within you. And it's so often talked about on the negative side, but also the positive side. Like if you are illuminating a person's bravery or some awesome feat or something really honorable that they've done, you can recognize it because you somewhere within you wants that, understands that trait already,
Yes.
and you
Right.
want more of it, you want greater of it or whatever.
Right.
So
Yeah. And these, heroes they don't have to be big, and they don't even have to exist in your life in that form for a very long time. So I'd been out of college for about 4 years. I'd been working for the same company the whole time. I was unhappy. Downsizing was coming. It was on the horizon. It was inevitable. It's going to happen. And around that time, they brought in two contract IT guys. Um, and I got to be friends with those guys. And I remember very distinctly, like after work one day in the parking lot, I'm really, really unhappy with my job. And I was talking to one of them and I was asking him, like, how do you do this? How do you work as a contract person? And he would just kind of walk me through it. And I said, oh, you're just so brave to do that. I mean, you don't have a regular job. These contracts come and go. I could never do that. And he said, sure, you could. It's easy. I said, what do you mean it's easy? It looks hard to me. And again, he just kind of walked me through, like, made the argument for why he does it, not for why I should do it, but for why he does it. And that just completely flipped my attitude about the whole thing. And so those two guys were heroes to me briefly. And then I had the breakthrough where I was like, well, I want to do what they're doing and I can do it. And then once I started doing it, it's like, now we're peers.
mhm.
So someone doesn't have to, again, be larger than life, like multi-year type thing. Sometimes people can just appear in your life.
Hmm.
You idealize them for what they're doing, and if you can sort of bring yourself into the frame of mind that, like, I could see myself doing that, and then you do it, it's like, okay, now we're just peers and we work together.
What's up? This is Chris Wilson. Thank you so much for checking out the content, and I hope you found value within it. If you did, please like, subscribe, and share, as it helps the channel grow and helps me continue my work of seeking deeper truths and sharing it with the world.